You are looking at the world right now. Light is landing on your eyes. Sound is hitting your ears. Your fingers are pressing against something solid. And you believe, with every fiber of your being, that what you are experiencing is real, that it is complete, that your senses are giving you a faithful picture of what is actually out there. Good. Hold on to that feeling. Hold on to that certainty, because I am about to take it apart piece by piece, and by the time I am finished, you will not be able to look at a blank wall the same way again. See, I spent my whole career studying the laws of nature. Particles, fields, forces, the whole machinery of the physical universe. And I have to tell you something strange. The deeper I went into what the universe is actually made of, the more disturbed I became. Not about the universe is magnificent. What disturbed me was us. The fact that the wet, electrical, 3-pound machine sitting between your ears, your brain, is running what amounts to the most aggressive censorship operation in the known world. Your brain does not show you reality. It shows you a story about reality, a highly abridged story, a story with more than 90% of the pages torn out. That is not a metaphor. That is not poetry. That is not some vague philosophical hand-waving. That is physics and biology working together, and I can show you exactly where the editing happens, exactly why it happens, and exactly what it is costing you every second of every day. Let us start with what seems like the most trustworthy thing you have got, the thing you rely on more than any other sense, your eyes. You open your eyes in the morning, and the world just appears. There is the ceiling, the lamp, the window, colors everywhere, shapes in sharp focus, and it all feels so immediate, so automatic, that you would be forgiven for thinking your eyes work like a camera. Light comes in, image gets projected on a screen, the brain looks at the screen. Simple as that. And in fairness, the engineering is impressive. The human eye has roughly 130 million receptor cells packed into the retina. The lens adjusts its focus in about 350 milliseconds. The dynamic range of the system, the range from the dimmest thing you can see to the brightest, covers something like 10 orders of magnitude. That is a factor of 10 billion. No camera on Earth comes close. So you would be right to feel impressed, right to trust those eyes. If you were buying a camera with those specifications, you would pay a fortune. Evolution spent about 500 million years developing this device, and in terms of raw engineering, it is a masterpiece. And so you trust it, of course you trust it. You trust it the way you trust the ground under your feet. It feels solid, it feels reliable. It has never failed you in any way you have noticed. That last phrase is important. In any way you have noticed, because the eyes have been failing you your entire life. They have been lying to you since the day you were born. And the lies are so good, so seamless, so woven into the fabric of your experience, that catching them requires instruments and experiments that did not exist until very recently. Let me show you the first crack, and I noticed this a long time ago when I was teaching at Caltech. I was lecturing on color, on how the eye actually processes light, and I said to the students, look, the retina is not just a sensor, it is in fact brain tissue. This is embryologically true. When a baby is forming in the womb, a piece of the brain grows outward, pushes right out to the front of the head, and becomes the retina. Someone once described it beautifully by saying that the brain has developed a way to look out upon the world. Your eye is a piece of the brain that is touching light on the outside. And that changes everything. Because a camera does not think. A camera does not have opinions. A camera does not decide what matters and what does not. But the retina does. Before a single signal reaches the main part of your brain, the retina has already been doing calculations. There are 4 different kinds of cells in there, interconnected horizontally, combining information from neighboring receptors, amplifying some signals, suppressing others. None of the other senses involve this much computation before the signal even gets to a nerve you can measure. I said that in my lectures, and I meant it. The eye is the most complicated piece of front-end processing in the entire nervous system. So already, before the information leaves your eyeball, someone has been editing. The retina is not a camera film, passively recording photons. It is a processor, an opinionated processor. And it has been making decisions about what to pass along before you, the conscious you, the you who thinks you are in charge, gets to see anything at all. But fine, maybe the editing is minor. Maybe the retina is just cleaning up the signal, making it sharper, more reliable, like adjusting the contrast on a photograph, removing a little noise. No harm in that, right? That is what I used to think, and then I learned about the numbers, the actual numbers. And the numbers are not minor. The numbers are terrifying. Here is a number that should unsettle you. Your nervous system, the whole thing, your eyes, ears, skin, nose, tongue, all of it, is bombarding your brain with roughly 11 million bits of information every single second. 11 million. And out of that enormous flood, how much reaches your conscious mind? How much do you actually experience? About 40 to 50 bits per second. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Do not move past it. Let it land. Imagine a river. A mighty river. The Amazon, carrying 11 million gallons of water per second. And at the other end of this river, there is a person with a thimble. And that person is scooping out 40 to 50 drops per second and saying, "This is the river. I have seen the whole river. That is you. That is all of us. Every waking moment, your brain is not gently trimming the edges of reality. It is throwing away almost the entire thing and handing you a tiny, carefully selected summary. And the summary is not random. It is curated. It is biased. It is shaped by what your brain thinks you need, based on patterns learned over a lifetime and instincts hardened over millions of years of evolution. And you never notice. You walk around all day long with a sense of completeness, a feeling that you are seeing everything that matters, hearing everything important. And the truth is that 99.995% of the incoming information never makes it to your awareness. The world is shouting at you through every channel, and you are hearing a whisper, a carefully chosen whisper. Now, a student once asked me, well, she put it quite sensibly. She said, "Professor, maybe the brain is just being efficient. Maybe the stuff it throws away is genuinely unimportant. Maybe those 11 million bits are mostly noise, and that is a reasonable guess, an intelligent guess. But it is wrong in an interesting way, and I want to show you exactly why it is wrong. Right now, you can feel the clothes on your skin. Can you not? The fabric touching your arms, your legs, your back. Once I mention it, there it is, you feel it. But 10 seconds ago, before I said anything, that sensation was gone. Your brain was receiving every one of those tactile signals, every pressure, every texture, and it was actively suppressing them, blocking them from your consciousness. Not because the signals were weak, they were strong, but because your brain had decided they were not relevant at that moment. That suppression is not happening at random. And this is the part that really got my attention, because there is actual machinery in there doing a specific job, and the job is not what you think. There is a structure deep in the center of your brain called the thalamus. It is about the size of a walnut. Think of it as a relay station, like a telephone exchange in the old days, where operators would connect calls. Every sensory signal coming from your body, everything from your eyes, your ears, your skin, passes through the thalamus on its way to the cortex, the outer layer of the brain where conscious thought happens. Now, for a long time, people thought that was all the thalamus did. Relay signals. Take a call from the retina, patch it through to the visual cortex. Take a call from the cochlea, route it to the auditory cortex. A passive switchboard operator, just making connections. But it turns out the thalamus is not passive at all. It is doing something far more interesting and far more aggressive. It is filtering. It is deciding which calls get through and which get dropped. It is a gatekeeper. And like any good gatekeeper, it takes orders from the boss. The thalamus has a thin shell of cells wrapped around it called the reticular nucleus. Beautiful structure, a net of neurons draped over the relay station like a web. And this reticular nucleus receives instructions not from the senses but from the prefrontal cortex, the executive part of the brain, the part that decides what you should be paying attention to right now. When you need to focus on something visual, the prefrontal cortex sends a message down to the reticular nucleus saying, in effect, suppress everything that is not vision. Shut down the auditory channel. Dampen the tactile channel. Turn down the volume on smell. I need the visual line clear. And the reticular nucleus obeys. It uses inhibitory signals, chemical stop signs, to choke off the irrelevant channels before the information even reaches the cortex. This is an absolutely crucial point, and I want to make sure you do not miss it. For decades, neuroscientists described attention as a spotlight. You know the metaphor, the brain shines its beam on what matters, and whatever the beam hits gets amplified. Everything else just fades into the background naturally. But that metaphor is backward. Completely backward. The brain is not brightening what matters. It is dimming everything else. You do not see things because your brain has turned up the volume on them. You see things because your brain has muted everything else. In the spotlight model, the unattended information is still there, just less vivid. In the suppression model, The unattended information is actively strangled before it reaches your awareness. You are living behind a gate that opens only for what the boss says is important. And when that filtering breaks down, the results are catastrophic. In schizophrenia, there is evidence that this thalamic gating system malfunctions. The reticular nucleus does not suppress enough. And what happens? The person is overwhelmed by sensory information. Every sound is as loud as every other sound. Every visual detail demands equal attention. It is unbearable. The brain without its filter does not see more of reality. It collapses under the weight of it. So here we are. The mechanism behind all this deletion is not some crude quality control step. It is a sophisticated, cortically driven suppression system evolved over hundreds of millions of years, running every second you are awake. But wait, that is just the processing side. We have not even talked about the raw material, the physical signals themselves. Let me ask you something simple. What can you see? If you say everything around me, you are wrong. Spectacularly wrong. And this is where the physics gets really disturbing. Your eyes respond to electromagnetic radiation. That is all light is, an oscillating electric and magnetic field traveling through space. But electromagnetic radiation comes in an enormous range of wavelengths. The spectrum goes from radio waves, which can be kilometers long, all the way down to gamma rays, which have wavelengths smaller than an atomic nucleus. And in between, you have microwaves, infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays. All of it is electromagnetic radiation. All of it is light in the physical sense. And your eyes respond to wavelengths between roughly 380 nanometers and 750 nanometers. That is it. A nanometer is a billionth of a meter. You are sensitive to a band of wavelengths that spans a few hundred billionths of a meter, in a spectrum that stretches from waves longer than a football field to waves smaller than a proton. How much of the total electromagnetic spectrum does your visible band cover? 0.0035%. Let me say that again slowly because I think you need to hear it spoken out loud. The visible spectrum, the thing you call light, represents 3.5 thousandths of 1% of the electromagnetic radiation that exists. Everything you have ever seen with your naked eyes, every sunset that took your breath away, every face you have ever loved, every mountain, every ocean, every painting in every museum, every star in the night sky, every page of every book you have ever read, all of it comes from this inconceivably thin slice of the spectrum. You are blind to the other 99.9965%. And we are not talking about exotic, hypothetical, faraway radiation. We are talking about signals that are flying through this very room, through your body, right now, at this exact moment. Radio waves are passing through you as I speak. Every radio station, every television broadcast, every communication signal is streaming through the air and through the walls and through your skull, and you feel nothing. Infrared radiation is pouring off your body. You are literally glowing in wavelengths you cannot see. If you could see an infrared, every person in this room would look like a luminous being, radiating heat in patterns and colors that have no names, because we have never experienced them. Ultraviolet light from the sun hits you every time you step outside. It is energetic enough to damage your DNA, and your skin knows it. That is why you sunburn, but your eyes cannot detect it. Meanwhile, a honeybee uses ultraviolet to navigate. Flowers that look plain white to you are blazing with ultraviolet patterns that guide the bee straight to the nectar. The bee is seeing something that is genuinely there on the same flower you are looking at, and you will never see it without instruments. Microwaves from communication towers and satellites are everywhere around you. X-rays pass through your soft tissue. Gamma rays from cosmic events reach the Earth's surface. You are bathed in electromagnetic radiation, absolutely soaked in it, marinating in a stew of signals and frequencies, and you can detect almost none of it. You walk through an ocean of information every day, and you see only the faintest, thinnest shimmer on the surface. If a creature arrived from another world and could see the full electromagnetic spectrum, it would look at you and say, "These organisms are nearly completely blind. How do they function?" And the answer is, we function because we never knew what we were missing. Ignorance in this case is operationally useful. You do not need to see radio waves to find food or avoid a predator, so evolution never bothered to give you that ability. But operationally useful is a long way from complete picture of reality. Now I want to go even deeper, because we have been talking about what the brain filters and what the eyes cannot see. But there is a third layer of deletion happening, and this one might be the most unsettling of all. The brain does not just filter incoming signals. It invents things that are not there. manufactures them out of nothing, and then presents them to you with such confidence that you would stake money on their reality. Let me demonstrate with a simple fact about your own eyeballs that you probably do not know. Each of your eyes has a blind spot. Right now, as you look at the world, there is a patch in each eye's visual field where you literally cannot see anything, because that is where the optic nerve exits the retina. The nerve fibers have to pass through the retinal surface on their way to the brain, and at that exit point, there are no receptor cells, no rods, no cones, nothing, just a hole in the data. The blind spot is not tiny either. It covers roughly 5 to 7 degrees of visual angle. If you held out your hand at arm's length, the blind spot in each eye is about the size of a lemon at that distance. Not negligible. And yet, do you see a hole in the world? A dark patch? A gap? You do not, because your brain fills it in. It takes information from the surrounding area, pixels from the neighborhood, so to speak, makes a statistical guess about what ought to be in that spot, and paints it in with such seamless skill that you cannot tell the difference between what your eye actually detected and what your brain simply made up. It is the visual equivalent of a carpenter matching wood grains so perfectly you cannot see the patch. You have been looking at a world with 2 lemon-sized holes in it your entire life, and you have never once noticed them without specifically, deliberately testing for them. That is not an anomaly. That is not a bug in the system. That is the system. Invention is how the whole thing works. Think about what happens when you look around a room. You move your gaze from the window to the bookshelf, to the lamp, and throughout all of this you feel as if you are seeing a rich, detailed, high-resolution panorama, as if the whole room is present to you in full color and sharp focus all at once, a complete scene, but you are not seeing anything of the sort. The only part of your retina that has high-resolution color vision is a tiny spot in the center called the fovea, which covers roughly 2 degrees of your visual field. 2 degrees. That is about the width of your thumbnail held at arm's length. Everything outside that minuscule window is blurry, low resolution, and has poor color discrimination. Way out in the periphery, your vision is nearly colorless. You are essentially looking at the world through a tiny high-definition peephole surrounded by a vast fog. But you do not experience it that way, do you? You experience a wide, vivid, detailed, colorful world. Why? Because your brain is constructing it. Your eyes dart around in rapid movements called saccades, about 3 to 4 times per second, and each time they land on a new spot, the fovea grabs a high-resolution snapshot of whatever is at the center of gaze. Your brain then stitches these snapshots together over time into a single seamless panorama, like a mosaic built from thousands of tiny tiles. The complete picture never exists at any single moment. It is assembled from fragments collected over several seconds and held in memory, updated constantly as your eyes continue to move. What you see right now is not a photograph. It is a painting, an ongoing reconstruction. And here is the truly wild part. During each saccade, while your eyes are actually in motion, sweeping from one fixation point to the next, you are effectively blind. The motion of the eye across the retina would produce a blurred, smeared mess of an image, completely useless. So your brain solves the problem in the most elegant way possible. It shuts down visual processing during the movement. It goes dark. This is called saccadic suppression. 3 to 4 times per second, for a few tens of milliseconds each time, your visual system simply turns off, and then it fills in the gap with the last thing it saw, so you never notice the interruption. Add it up over a day. You lose something like 40 minutes of visual input just from saccadic suppression. 40 minutes per day when your visual system was switched off and your brain was running on memory. And you did not notice a single one of those blackouts, not one, because the brain smoothed them over, filled them in, and kept the illusion of continuity perfectly intact. Can you see why I find this deeply, profoundly disturbing? The picture in your head is not the world. It is your brain's theory of the world. A very good theory, most of the time. Good enough to keep you alive, good enough to help you catch a ball or avoid a car or recognize a face. But it is a theory, a model. And models are not reality. Now, so far I have been talking about biology, about neurons and retinas and thalamic gates. But as a physicist, I cannot leave this here, because the physics makes it even worse. Let me tell you about what is actually out there, what reality looks like when you strip away the brain's editing. Start with the thing you think is most solid and real, the table in front of you, or the chair underneath you. You knock on it and it feels hard, unyielding, continuous, dense. It feels like a thing, a solid, reliable, no-nonsense thing. You stake your life on it every time you sit down. But what is a table, actually? If you could shrink yourself down, smaller and smaller, past the grain of the wood, past the fibers, past the molecules, you would find atoms. And what is an atom? An atom is a nucleus, unimaginably small, surrounded by a cloud of electrons at relatively enormous distances. How small is the nucleus compared to the atom? I love this comparison because the numbers are so absurd they stop feeling like numbers. If you blew up an atom to the size of a football stadium, the entire stadium, parking lot to parking lot, the nucleus would be a grain of sand sitting at the 50-yard line. A single grain. Everything else, the bleachers, the field, the concession stands, the sky above, all of that is empty. Not kind of empty, not mostly empty in the way your garage is mostly empty with a few boxes in the corner, overwhelmingly, staggeringly, incomprehensibly empty. An atom is 99.9999999% empty space, that is 13 nines after the decimal point. So the table that you think is solid is actually a vast architecture of nothingness, punctuated by specks of matter so small you need special notation just to write down their size. And those specks are held in their arrangement, not by physical contact but by electromagnetic forces, fields pushing and pulling across the void. And when you put your hand on the table, here is where it gets personal. Your hand does not touch the table, not in any physical sense of the word touch. The electrons in the outermost atoms of your skin repel the electrons in the outermost atoms of the table's surface. These electrons, both negatively charged, push each other away with enormous force. What you experience as the feeling of pressing on a solid surface is actually the sensation of electromagnetic repulsion between two clouds of particles that never make contact. You have never touched anything in your entire life. Not a person, not a doorknob, not the ground beneath your feet. Every handshake you have ever had was two electron clouds bouncing off each other across an unbridgeable gap. Every kiss, if we are being strictly honest, was an electromagnetic event, not a physical one. The atoms never met. I am not saying this to be clever. I am saying this because it illustrates something fundamental about the gap between what your brain shows you and what physics says is actually happening. Your brain presents the table as solid. Physics says it is mostly empty space held together by fields. Your brain presents your hand touching the table. Physics says no contact occurs. Your brain presents a world of continuous surfaces and sharp boundaries. Physics says boundaries are fuzzy probability distributions of electron density that trail off gradually and never truly end. Two entirely different descriptions of the same event. And the physics one is correct. Now take color. You look at a red apple and you think redness is a property of the apple. It is not. Out in the physical world, there is no such thing as red. There is no such thing as any color. Color is not a property of objects or of light. Color is a property of your brain. I explain this in my lectures at Caltech in quite some detail. What exists out in the physical world is electromagnetic radiation with different wavelengths, just waves, oscillating fields, no color, none. When light from the sun hits an apple, the molecular structure of the apple's skin absorbs certain wavelengths and reflects others. The reflected wavelengths, the ones the apple did not absorb, enter your eye, where they strike 3 types of cone cells, each containing a different photopigment that is sensitive to a different range of wavelengths. One type responds best to short wavelengths, another to medium, another to long. Those 3 signals, just 3 numbers, are then combined, compared, run through the horizontal cells and bipolar cells and ganglion cells in the retina, already being processed before they leave your eyeball, and what comes out the other end, after even more processing in the brain, is the experience you call red, but the redness is entirely inside your head. It is not on the apple. It is not in the light. It is not floating in the air between the apple and your eye. There is nothing red about a wavelength of 650 nanometers any more than there is something loud about a particular amplitude of air pressure waves. The redness is a label, a neural code, a piece of the brain's internal filing system invented to help you categorize the world, a useful label, an extraordinarily useful label. Without it, you could not tell a ripe fruit from an unripe one at a glance. But a label nonetheless. Galileo knew this, by the way. Back in the 1620s, he wrote that if you removed the perceiving creature, colors would be abolished and annihilated. He was right. Strip away every brain in the universe, and the electromagnetic waves would still propagate. But redness, blueness, greenness, gone, those were always and only inside the skulls. And it gets stranger still. You know that yellow light exists. You see yellow every day. Bananas, sunflowers, taxicabs. But here is a peculiar fact I love to show students. You can see yellow when there is no yellow light present at all. If I shine red light and green light on the same spot, your eye will report yellow. The wavelength of yellow light is around 570 nanometers. But neither the red light at 650 nanometers nor the green light at 530 nanometers is anywhere near 570. There is no yellow light in the room, not a single photon of it, yet you see yellow because the combination of red and green stimulates your medium wavelength cones and long wavelength cones in a ratio that happens to match what yellow light would produce. And your brain has no way to tell the difference. It just sees the cone response pattern and says, that is yellow. Your television works this way. Every yellow you have ever seen on a screen was actually red and green pixels sitting next to each other. No yellow light was emitted. Your brain invented the yellow. I pointed out in my lectures that this makes vision fundamentally different from hearing. If you play a C note and an E note simultaneously on a piano, you can train yourself to hear both notes. You can pick them apart. A musician can distinguish the individual tones in a chord, but if I show you a mixture of red light and green light, you cannot see the red and the green separately. You see yellow. Your visual system has fused the inputs into a single percept. The components are gone, dissolved into the brain's interpretation. The individual wavelengths have been destroyed as far as your experience is concerned. This is not a quirk of color vision. This is the fundamental nature of perception. Your brain does not report raw data. It interprets, it infers, it models. And the model is not the territory. The map is not the landscape. Let me push one more step into the abyss. Because we have been talking about how your brain constructs a simplified model of the macroscopic world, the world of tables and apples and faces. But quantum mechanics reveals that the underlying reality is stranger than any model your brain could possibly construct. Not just simplified, fundamentally different in kind. At the quantum level, before something is measured, it does not have definite properties. This is not a statement about our ignorance. It is not that the electron is sitting at a particular spot and we just do not know which spot. That was what people thought at first. That was the sensible, comfortable interpretation. But experiment after experiment has ruled it out. The electron genuinely does not have a definite position until a measurement forces the issue. It exists in what we call a superposition, a mathematical description of all the places it might be found, with various probabilities, all of them real, all of them simultaneously valid. Only when you make a measurement, only when the electron interacts with a measuring device or another system in a particular way, does a specific outcome occur. Before that, asking where is the electron is not like asking where did I leave my keys. It is more like asking which side will the coin land on, while the coin is still spinning in the air. The answer does not yet exist. It will be created by the act of landing. I have said before that nobody understands quantum mechanics. I mean that sincerely. There are people who can calculate with it brilliantly, who can predict experimental outcomes to 12 decimal places, and they still cannot tell you what it means that a particle does not have a position until you look. There are at least half a dozen interpretations, and each one is stranger than the last. But they all agree on the core mathematical fact: the definite, solid, specific world of your everyday experience is not what is happening at the atomic scale. This means that the world your brain shows you, a world of objects in specific places with particular colors and fixed boundaries, crisp edges, separate things, that world does not exist at the quantum level. What exists are fields, probability amplitudes, interference patterns, wave functions that spread out through space and carry information about what might happen, not what has happened. Things that have no analog in your sensory experience, not because they are too complicated for you to understand intellectually. You can learn the mathematics, but because your senses were never designed to detect them. Evolution built your eyes to track the motion of ripe fruit and the approach of predators on the African savanna. It did not build them to perceive the wave function of a hydrogen atom. Why would it? A wave function has never eaten anyone, and yet the wave function is what is actually there. The ripe fruit is the simplification. The predator is the cartoon version. Now I want to bring all of this together because I think most people, when they hear that the brain filters reality, they think it is a cute fact, a fun bit of trivia, something you mention at a dinner party to sound interesting. Did you know you can only see 0.0035% of the electromagnetic spectrum? And everyone nods and says wow and takes another sip of wine and changes the subject to sports. But I do not think we should change the subject. Because when you lay out all the pieces side by side, the picture that emerges is not cute, it is radical. It changes what you mean when you use the word see. Consider what we have established step by step. First, your senses detect only a vanishingly small fraction of the physical signals that exist. You are blind to 99.9965% of electromagnetic radiation. You are deaf to the vast majority of sound frequencies that other animals can hear. Dogs hear whistles you cannot. Bats navigate by ultrasound you will never detect. Sharks sense electric fields. Migratory birds read the magnetic field of the earth like a compass. You cannot sense magnetic fields, electric fields, radioactivity, or most of what the universe is doing around you at every moment. Second, of the tiny sliver that your senses do detect, your brain throws away more than 99.99% before it reaches your consciousness. The thalamic gating system, driven by your prefrontal cortex, decides what you are allowed to be aware of and actively suppresses everything else, not dimming it, suppressing it, blocking it at the gate. Third, what remains after all that filtering is not even presented to you faithfully. Your brain fills in blind spots, stitches together fragments collected over seconds of eye movements, invents details in the peripheral field, suppresses visual input during saccades, and packages the entire patchwork result as a seamless, continuous, high-definition experience. You never see the blind spots. You never notice the saccadic blackouts. You never realize that your peripheral vision is nearly colorless. The presentation is a masterwork of editing, and like all great editing, it is invisible. Fourth, the physical reality underneath what you do perceive, the atoms, the electromagnetic fields, the quantum processes, bears almost no resemblance to the vivid, colored, solid, continuous world you experience. Color does not exist out there. Solidity does not exist out there. The sharp boundary between your coffee cup and the air around it does not exist at the atomic level. Your hand never touches the cup. The cup is mostly empty space. The atoms in the cup do not have definite positions until something forces the issue. The entire edifice of your everyday reality, the reality that feels so obvious, so given, so undeniably there, is a construction, top to bottom, front to back, every single pixel of it. So what are you left with? You are left with a model, a brain-constructed, evolutionarily optimized, continuously updated model. It is an extraordinarily good model. I want to be clear about that. It was refined by something like 3.5 billion years of evolution, starting from the first light-sensitive cells in ancient organisms, tested against reality in every generation, through the harshest possible criterion, survival, and tuned to be as useful as a model can be for a creature of your size, moving at your speed, living in your particular environment on the surface of this particular planet. But useful is not the same as true, and good enough is not the same as complete. A subway map is useful, brilliantly useful. It tells you which stop comes after which. It tells you where to transfer. It shows the connections between lines clearly. But a subway map is not the city. The actual city has buildings, streets, rivers, parks, alleyways, garbage cans, pigeons, crowds, all of which the map has thrown away. The map was designed to help you navigate, not to give you a complete picture. If you tried to walk from one subway station to another, using only the subway map as your guide, you would be lost instantly, because the map distorts distances, angles, and geography to make the connections clearer. Your brain is running a subway map of reality, and it is a very good subway map, but it is not the city. Now, some people find this depressing. They say, so we can never know reality, we are trapped behind our own senses forever, and I want to push back on that because I think it misses the most remarkable part of this story. The thing that makes us different from every other creature on this planet is that we figured this out. We are the only animal that has managed to discover the limitations of its own perception. That is, when you think about it, an almost paradoxical achievement. The brain, using itself as the only tool available, looked inward and caught itself cheating. No hawk, soaring with vision 8 times sharper than ours, looks up at the sky and wonders about radio waves. No mantis shrimp, despite its 16 types of photoreceptor, sits at the bottom of the ocean thinking about quantum fields. No dog, with its extraordinary sense of smell, ponders the molecules it cannot detect. These creatures are superb at what they do, but they accept the boundaries of their senses without question, because they do not know the boundaries exist. We do, and we did not stop at knowing. We built instruments. Think about what that means. Our brains delete 99.995% of incoming reality. Our eyes see 0.0035% of the electromagnetic spectrum. Our tactile sense is an electromagnetic fiction. And yet, despite all that, we figured out that atoms are mostly empty space. We figured out that color is a neural construction with no existence outside the skull. We mapped the full electromagnetic spectrum from radio waves kilometers long to gamma rays smaller than an atomic nucleus. We discovered that gravity bends light. We found that space itself can stretch and compress. We detected gravitational waves from the collision of two black holes over 1 billion light-years away, a signal so faint that it changed the length of a 4-kilometer tunnel by less than 1,000th of the diameter of a proton. Let me repeat that because I think the scale of that achievement deserves a moment of silence. The instrument LIGO detected a change in distance smaller than 1,000th of a proton. The proton is already 100,000 times smaller than an atom, and the atom is already the thing your senses cannot detect. We reached down past the limits of perception, past the limits of microscopy, past the limits of anything that has ever been directly observed by a human being, and we measured something real. With the same brain that hallucinates yellow from red and green pixels on a television screen. That is the part that staggers me. Not that our senses are limited. Of course they are limited. They are biological instruments, evolved for a specific job on the surface of a small rocky planet, and they do that job beautifully. What staggers me is that the same brain that runs this heavily edited, incomplete, gap-filled, partially fictional model of reality is also the brain that managed to detect the editing, to catch itself in the act, to ask the question, what am I not seeing, and then to go build a machine that could answer it. Physics is the art of seeing past the model. That is what we do. That is what all of science does, really. But physics gets to the bones of it. Every equation, every experiment, every prediction confirmed or refuted by data is another step beyond the keyhole, another piece of the enormous room revealed. And the room, I have to tell you, is far more interesting than the sketch. I remember an argument I used to have with an artist friend of mine. He said that a scientist looks at a flower and reduces it, takes apart its beauty, dissects the petals, and kills the wonder. And I told him he was completely wrong. I can see the beauty of the flower as well as he can. I can smell it. I can appreciate its form, its delicacy, its color, such as it is, the brain-constructed version of it. I enjoy that. But I can also see things he cannot. I can see the cells inside those petals, organized in layers, transporting water and nutrients through microscopic vessels. I can see the chemical processes producing the pigments, anthocyanins and carotenoids, and chlorophyll, molecules whose structures we know atom by atom. I can see the electromagnetic radiation being selectively absorbed and reflected, with the reflected wavelengths reaching my eye and triggering a cascade of neural computation that produces the experience of red or yellow. I can see the evolutionary pressures that shape that particular color over millions of years, because flowers are not colored for our benefit. They are colored to attract pollinators, bees and butterflies and hummingbirds, who see in wavelengths the artist cannot even imagine. The flower has ultraviolet landing strips painted on its petals that say the nectar is this way, and the artist has never seen them and never will, not without a special camera. Science does not reduce the flower. Science adds to it. It adds layers, details, connections, histories, patterns, all of them real, all of them verified, all of them invisible to the unaided eye. The artist sees one layer of a flower that has dozens, and every layer is more beautiful than the last. The brain deletes 90% of reality, and honestly, that is the conservative estimate. The real number is vastly higher if you count everything that physics tells us exists but our senses cannot detect. Dark matter, which makes up roughly 27% of the total mass energy of the universe, interacts gravitationally but produces no light, no sound, no vibration that any human sense or any human-built sensor has yet directly detected. Dark energy, which accounts for roughly 68% of the universe's total energy budget, is stretching space itself at an accelerating rate, and no one alive today can feel it happening. Together, dark matter and dark energy make up about 95% of everything. The stuff your senses respond to, ordinary matter, the atoms and molecules and electromagnetic waves we have been discussing, that is only about 5% of what is out there. You are living in a universe that is 95% invisible, made of stuff your brain has no category for, no name for, no experience of. And out of that 5%, your senses catch a sliver, and out of that sliver, your brain shows you a fraction. But here's the beautiful thing, the gorgeous, redemptive, staggering thing. We do not have to accept the deletion. We do not have to accept the deletion. We can use the very organ that does the deleting, the brain, to look beyond itself, to ask the question, what am I not seeing? And then to go find the answer. That is what science is. It is the refusal to accept the edited version. You live inside a model. You always have, you always will, but the model is getting better. Every decade, every experiment, every instrument we build adds another line to the sketch, and even if we never see the whole room, we know it is there. We know it is vastly larger and stranger and more beautiful than anything our senses have shown us. And knowing that, truly grasping it, changes everything about how you look at the world. Because the next time you open your eyes and the room appears, all those colors, all that solidity, all that seamless completeness, you will know it for what it is. A magnificent performance staged by the 3 pounds of tissue between your ears, working with less than 1,000% of the available data. And you will wonder, as I have wondered many times, what the rest of the show looks like. So here is what I want you to think about tonight or tomorrow or whenever this catches up with you. Pick one thing you see every day. A wall, a cloud, the back of your hand, and ask yourself, what is actually happening there that my brain has decided not to show me? What frequencies, what forces, what structures, what processes are going on right beneath the surface of what I experience? Write it down. Your answer. I would like to know what you came up with.